Dr. Kim, you are a ninth generation herbalist with lineage dating back to the 16th century. How has your heritage and upbringing influenced your understanding and practice of medicine?
It's everything to me. It's exactly what I'm rooted in, you know. I've known it a little bit different, which has been brought to my attention, and I really appreciate it because I never thought about it like this before, but I recognize that it is a little bit different compared to a lot of people out there, which is the fact that I was born into this, right? Hence, obviously coming from a lineage, but also not just coming from this lineage, you know, in the mountains of East Asia, as you see in the movies, but being part of this lineage in this modern world, you know, growing up in Southern California and learning that balance, which is ultimately what everything is rooted in, the Tao, the universe, that balance. And so it is truly who I am. I mean, when I decided to have this become not only my life path, but my career path, my everything, I made a commitment. I say it's my duty, you know, very, very warrior-like, but it's the truth. It's my duty to embody this, make it my own, be very natural about it in the way that I live it and also how I share it. And in the end of the day, I know that, you know, the reason all of these practices, these tools, as I call the 3 M's, I'm sure we'll get into it, medicine, movement, meditation, I always love to remind myself, and when I teach around the world, my favorite thing is to acknowledge that there's a reason it has been passed down for that many generations, right? And the truth is the medicine and these practices have been around for thousands upon thousands of years. And there's one reason. It's because it works, you know? And so yes, everything I do is rooted in that.
Do you think growing up in San Diego and growing up in a modern society was to your benefit? Or
Absolutely.
Do you think that detracted from spending more time in Asia?
I think that it is exactly what it's supposed to be. You know what I mean? I can't say this is the way, the path for everyone, but for me, living in California, growing up, by my choice, really. I was never forced, as you and I briefly touched on. You know, I did not come into this family and this is the way it was and this is what you have to do. It was around me, and I decided that it is something that I wanted to become a part of. And I believe that it's exactly what the world needs right now, to the best of my ability, you know, is certainly these tools, but any way that I can share them. And by being part of the modern world, by being East and West, I mean, my father's was Korean, my mother's American. You know, it really is the East-West, old, new. I say I'm like hopefully some kind of a living example of exactly this integration. So I think it lends itself to everything that my life path, basically.
Yeah.
Yep.
You touched briefly, and I think we just can dive right into the 3 M's. I think something that I really like about you is that you have taken these multiple different modalities that make you.
Absolutely.
And you've integrated them into a whole rather than taking one individual, removing it from the whole and saying, this is my focus. What are, again, the 3 M's, and walk us through a little bit of each one?
Sure. The 3 M's. I'll sit forward for this. The 3 M's are medicine, movement, and meditation. And the medicine aspect, kind of just to spend a little bit of time on each, is what I call my day job now. That resonates with me, at least. It is, you know, back in the day when I was in my very late teens, early adulthood, I decided to go on the path of studying Western medicine. I have grown up around this medicine for my lineage, particularly herbal medicine, so plant medicine. And it was when I was studying, going to a really good school, close to here, and I realized because of some situations I saw in my life, how much this world needed to understand, this part of the world needed to understand our ancient medicine, Eastern medicine, traditional Oriental medicine, Chinese medicine. You hear many different ways of saying this. So I went to study. I thought that I would basically be in clinic, practicing, having patients. I absolutely loved that. And this is part of why I feel it's so important to share this. But kind of moving forward, the universe kept pushing me. It was subtle, but I definitely noticed, to sharing the formulation and this medicine with the world. So the medicine aspect in general is the way that we eat. Food is the best medicine. It's the supplements we put into our body. It's what we put onto our body. And that kind of is why I'm leading into this, that what I do, my day job in this pillar, is I'm a manufacturer of products that all come from the root of my lineage of that medicine, right? Particularly herbal medicine. So I make skincare, body care, hair care, internal supplements, muscle and joint, you name it. Anything you can possibly think of. And I create that for brands, carry it around the world in your high-end spas, retailers, big box stores. So when I say medicine, it's exactly everything I just said, which is, like I say, I've literally made it my day job, if you will. But in short, it is how we take care of ourselves as far as food and what we put onto our bodies, okay? Movement, how I'd like to present it today, is actually a very powerful form of medicine, which people don't always think of it that way, right? So any kind of movement is vital for us, running, walking, any kind of movement, because it moves our circulation of blood and chi, right? Our vital energy, which Eastern medicine, Ayurvedic, they all understand the vital energy piece that flows throughout our body. But the movement that I teach specifically is rooted in traditional martial arts. A little bit more specifically, what I teach is Qigong, okay? And so that is Qigong is the very first form of any kind of exercise, workout, breath work that could ever be known, because it started about 10,000 years ago. And it was by practitioners who wanted to understand how to cultivate qi and proper flow of energy and circulation throughout your body, which makes everything function, kind of in short. So movement is the best medicine, okay? So that's another pillar. The third pillar is meditation, as I say. So of course, while I'm a huge proponent of seated meditation as we think of it, actually what I'm referring to, and what I named my book to share the principles in any way I could, is called living meditation. And that phrase is not something that's been passed down for 9 generations, but the principle is. And that's the philosophy of all. So it's medicine and the philosophy through living meditation. And that is the training, the medicine for our mind, right? So we can take care of our bodies the best way possible, but we have to remember that we also have to train and take care of our mind. So those are the 3 M's, and they've been passed down for thousands upon thousands of years as tools that our ancient teachers and masters basically told us, kind of in conclusion here, that if we incorporate these 3 pillars, the 3 M's as I call them, into our daily life, that is exactly the secret, right? The fountain of youth, the secret to optimal health and beauty.
Talk to me a little bit about the difference between traditional or Chinese medicine and now where we've shifted to this more modern, westernized approach to medicine. What do you see as the difference, and what do you see as the benefit of one over the other?
Absolutely. Well, there's huge differences. I mean, here's the thing, though. As much as I say that, and I will go into that in a moment here, one of the things that just naturally, personally speaking, ever since as far back as I can remember, whenever I see things, whether it be medicine, whether it be philosophy, whatever it is, I actually always just tend to see how everything comes from the same root. I find it's just natural to me, and I find a lot of calm and peace in that. And so I love sharing that. So how I want to answer this is, while there are many differences that I can share in a moment here, at the end of the day, any good doctor, any good practitioner, by nature of just being human on this earth, we're all human. We have one mind, one body in this life, and all of the medicines, at least for any good doctor who truly is putting their heart into what they do, they wish to improve upon that, right? To keep everything functioning and flowing properly. So at the core, Eastern, Western, they're all medicines to take care of the human mind, body, okay? The differences, in general, what people will find, and it's pretty well known now, which is new. 20 years ago, this is not so well known, is that by nature, the Eastern medicine, for example, will look at the body as a whole, right? So not just pinpointing certain symptoms, but always it'll go down to the root of the imbalance or the condition. Again, mentally, physically, they even get into spiritually. And it's not spiritually as we might think, but literally that is part of our whole being. They talk about it, the Shen. That's not something I always share, and we certainly don't have to go into that. But more and more lately, especially with a lot of the imbalances that we see in our world, I think it's important to touch on that. So they really look at the whole being. They look at the root of everything. They look at your constitution, how you are born. Actually, we talked about this a bit. As much as there are some set principles or rules, if we like that word, about the human body, how it functions at different points in our life, whether you are a male, whether you are female, by nature, those energies, yin and yang, it also depends. Each one of us is different, right? So it really looks at the whole picture. And that's just a snapshot. I mean, we could sit here for literally weeks discussing, how every part of the body, according to Eastern medicine. But it looks at the whole picture and always looks at the root of where an imbalance is coming from. Whereas modern medicine, right, Western medicine, if you will, pinpoints things a lot more. So you have a symptom, here's a medicine. Usually it's medicine. Now it's moving into more different forms that we can also incorporate to take care of ourselves, to balance a condition that is not so great for us, but ultimately it'll fix the symptoms. And it doesn't always connect, right? And so I find that a lot with people who come to me for different recommendations or when I teach around the world, that a lot of times in the modern world, I find that people get frustrated, for lack of a better word, or discouraged because there might be all these different things happening to them and no one has ever expressed, and they don't know that it actually all comes from maybe the same thing, which makes it much less overwhelming to know that you can basically heal yourself, right? If that makes sense.
Do you find a lot of people coming to you because westernized medicine has failed them?
You know, that could be true, Kevin, because of my role and what I decided to do through my lab and educating on this medicine years and years, decades ago. I find not so many people necessarily come to me with that. I think just by sharing, I like putting it this way. It opens their eyes and their mind to another way of understanding that they never knew before. So the answer is yes, but it doesn't always come with such a negative connotation. In fact, that's one of the things I'm the most grateful about in my path of life, is that by nature, I'm able to be in front of many communities, so many different people, sharing this medicine, these tools with people who never even knew it existed. So
I find it interesting, too, the interconnectedness of a lot of symptoms and ailments,
yes.
and how when you actually reverse engineer and get down to the root,
Absolutely.
this is caused by that and
Absolutely.
that and that and that.
Yes.
And when we treat one symptom, you don't end up getting to the root, which is also the cause of 3 or 4 or 5
Yes.
other things that are going on in the body.
Yes.
Is there in traditional medicine or Chinese medicine, is there an approach or a process that you go through to uncover what that root is?
Oh, absolutely.
Or walk me through a little bit about what that looks like.
So traditionally, or, in general, whatever the best way of saying it is, if you were a patient and you came to see me, if I had a clinic, in that sense, you would come in, we have pulse diagnosis, we look at your tongue, we look at your entire being, right? So I always joke around, but it's the truth. I don't necessarily know it, but subtly, anytime I meet anyone, I immediately, kind of diagnose you, and it's the way, it's your vitality. It's how much circulation you have, how much chi you have. You definitely see that in someone's eyes, right? A lot of times your mental state, if you will, your mental health. So it really is a good Eastern medicine, or holistic in that sense, doctor will be able to look at your whole being from the moment you walk in. And it includes every part of you, every single part of you, even certain scents that all connects to different organ systems and your meridians. And so that's how we look at it. So ultimately, pulse diagnosis, tongue diagnosis, and then they go through a set of questions that kind of cover every single aspect of your body. And it's contained, it takes about 30 minutes. Sometimes it can lead into an hour, but it's not like with certain questions that you can answer about your sleep, about your digestion. It goes through every process. And that's how you can have a very clear vision, especially when you feel the pulse, because you feel the pulse. And that's how you can kind of get an inside picture of what's happening on the inside, because each position of your pulse, and there's several different positions on each wrist, okay? Ultimately, it connects to different organ systems. So you can see where someone's body, where they're standing.
Interesting.
Yeah, it is very interesting, actually.
How do you see, so we're living in a very technologically advanced world. How do you see the role of tech aiding, or
Absolutely.
maybe not aiding,
yes,
the advancement of traditional medicine?
No, I definitely think, in fact, I don't know if I answered you just outright, but I would like to, that I absolutely think there's a place for both. I like we spoke about, I'm not sure if I said it yet, but everything I do is rooted in the Tao. It is the universe. From the universe, the Tao came yin and yang, right? And so that's kind of how the ancient medicines and philosophies and practices began, where everything is built, right? It's always from yin and yang is that balance. So I'm kind of speaking on a very important principle, answering your question, but something that I really love to share. It's the way you look at everything in life. So when you start to understand that everything around you, the universe, nature around you, and furthermore, your own self, because you are a microcosm of the universe, everything is broken down into one, and then comes the two, the yin and the yang. And if you think about yin and yang, it looks like a fish, right? So one side is black, one side is white, but it looks like a fish because even in the black segment, there's a white dot, right? That looks like the eye. And even in the white segment, there's a black dot. And that represents the dichotomy and the balance of everything in life. Every single thing that you come across is that balance. And that is what the 3Ms constantly work with. So going to even Eastern and Western medicine, based on that same principle, you need both, right? Modern, traditional. And if we know the number one thing that I wish to share, I won't even say teach, the number one thing I wish to share with the world in any way I possibly can, and certainly something that I don't just practice, I literally could not live without, is that we have to constantly be in touch with ourselves. And I do see that happening more and more, right? Go to our doctors, go to our experts. Of course, they're there for us. They devote their whole lives, myself included, to go to for advice. But at the end of the day, no one knows you better than you know yourself. So you have to be aware of your own self, educate yourself, have the proper people to go to for direction, insight, recommendations. And then at the end of the day, the beautiful thing is you start to learn when to go to modern medicine, when to go to Eastern, for example, or the traditional medicines. I'll answer one more, so in case it's helpful, that in general, traditional medicine, your Ayurvedic, traditional Oriental medicine, of course, is what I'm devoted to and teach. They really look at your whole lifestyle. So it's meant to be a lifestyle. That's why I say it that way. Oftentimes you hear it as preventative, right? So it's like maintaining your body, taking care of yourself. It's everything we see right now. Wellness, longevity, biohacking. I mean, I've been talking about this for so long. When I began, everyone thought, wow, she's really kind of different, you know? And now, look, but that in general, your traditional medicines look at your whole life, having certain practices and habits, incorporating foods, incorporating supplements, putting the right things on your skin, topically, for example, so that you don't have to have imbalances, so that it doesn't lead to sickness. You can stop it beforehand. And modern medicine is incredibly good at diagnostics. You know, if you want to have a blood test to see very quickly what's going on in your body, have some of your MRIs, your CT scans, whatever it might be, it very quickly gives us a picture of what's happening on the inside fast, right? But that even has to be balanced sometimes. So that's one example of how they both very much, that integration is so beneficial for all of us. But when to do, when not to do. You know, if you have an infection, take an antibiotic. Amazing, right? It's not always necessary, but why wouldn't you do that? Because you're stubborn? You know, because that's not the medicine? These rules, people overcomplicate things. That's kind of...
You speak on the right thing to put on your body and understanding what is right for each specific scenario or case-by-case basis. How does someone figure out what would be the right topical solution in order to use?
Right. So it depends on what it is, of course. You know what I mean? Plant, obviously, I come from a lineage of herbal medicine equals plant medicine. And in many ways, all medicine comes from plants and in some way, shape, or form. So there, I mean, that question, I could go in so many different directions. Going to an Eastern medical practitioner or a practitioner who understands herbal medicine, plant medicine is one way to start. Of course, I create products for brands carried, big brands, global and indie brands that are, you would definitely know these names. They're literally in the stores that you shop at and online. But one of the ways, if I'm understanding your question correctly, to know good formulas or what's out there is you get to know these companies. Look into it a bit. We have all the access now to understand who the founders are, what's important to them. And at the end of the day, one of my favorite things to share, because as an herbologist, I mean, the number of herbs I studied in school and that I'm aware of is not anything that I would expect, if you're not a doctor of Eastern medicine or herbal medicine, you don't have to know every aspect. But in general, the things I stand for are on your daily life habits, as I've just mentioned, making sure that you put clean products onto and into your body. 20 years ago, I was on the forefront of natural products, first starting the spa industry, and people, it wasn't even a thing. Can you even imagine? There was a time where natural products, clean beauty, organic, people it was not a huge topic. Now it's everywhere, right? And my favorite way of understanding that myself and teaching on why that's important is I say this, right? Our bodies go through so much every single moment, whether we're sleeping, whether we are awake, stressed, relaxed, it doesn't matter. Our bodies are constantly having to rebalance with life, right? And so we all have a choice. That's the living meditation. No matter whatever happens in this life, it is your choice. You are completely accountable and responsible for the decisions that you make in your life. So it's very empowering and very daunting for some. I get it. But ultimately, when it comes to natural or clean, putting into your body or onto your body, if you think of how much your bodies go through and how many chemicals, how many preservatives, artificial, all these things that are harmful or hard for your body to balance with, if you picture it that way, doesn't it make sense? That wouldn't we want to make it that much easier for our body? So that's one of the kind of a lot of principles, a lot of education in one answer there. But
is there anything when selecting products, is there anything people should look to avoid? Or specific things that are in a lot of our products that right now, presently, we should not be putting on our body?
Sure. I mean, in skincare, you always hear no parabens, no synthetics. The preservatives are very, very important because those are all the chemicals that are not natural for our body and harder for our body to process. And for example, in the anti-aging world, I mean, I do so many of those products for many well-known skincare companies, but I have to always say that I don't actually even agree with that word anti-aging because there's no such thing. We will age, but how we age gracefully, that longevity really matters. And the thing is that there's a lot of things out there that in the moment can make us look great. And there's always a balance, Kevin. I mean, you will definitely see this in me. If you want to go and do some medical spa treatments, we all know what I'm talking about, then go for it because your body should be able to balance some things. But in general, when you keep piling on certain of these chemicals, preservatives, artificial colors, artificial fragrances, in food, artificial flavors, all these GMOs, all these things that are not natural for our bodies, they do build up. And then it becomes that much harder for our body to heal itself. True. So that's a general but important way to understand where you're not making yourself crazy that you can't buy anything. And there's amazing apps and tools out there now that all you have to do is scan a UPC code, type in a product company, and you always have to be careful because not always 100%, I have to say that, but you can find out a lot with a click of a button. That's another way technology can be helpful right now.
You talk a lot about balance. And
yes, I do.
Which I love.
My favorite topic.
And I've had an interesting relationship with balance in my life, as we spoke a little bit earlier, where I agree that balance is something that is great, but it's often in opposition to how my brain thinks. A word that you shared with me that really resonated with me was nourishing.
Yes.
How do you integrate a nourishing lifestyle into your own life and use that to balance the yin and the yang?
Yes. Again, it's a choice, and quite frankly, I hear what you're saying a little bit differently. You're simply balancing is what you're doing. It's not even that balancing is hard. That is part of the whole balance of it all. We're very profound, but it's the truth, right? And the reality is, we are speaking of things that I remember even saying, when I was 20, I did this. When you're 60, you do this. I'm bringing this up because that does matter. That's the cycle of life, right? That is longevity, is knowing where you're standing, what's happening in your life, and then making a choice of how you want to take care of yourself in that moment. By nature, I can totally resonate. When I was in my 20s, I shared with you. I mean, I would wake up at 5 a.m, train for marathons, go to school from 9 a.m. till 9 p.m., put clinic in between, probably have another workout, go to bed, right? And at that time, it worked for who I was, my constitution. I could handle it. I have a lot of energy. I have a lot of passion. I did these things and I felt good. I'm aware enough of myself that at that time, it didn't drain me. I didn't feel fatigued after doing so. Then as life kind of moves forward, and it's not necessarily age, but it could be different things happening in your life. At this point in my life personally, as an example, that doesn't feel so balanced. That doesn't feel so nourishing. And that's the word I said to you because relaxing does not always resonate with me. And there's plenty of people, particularly your Eastern medical doctors and practitioners who wouldn't love me saying that, but it's the truth. Just relaxing. That's not something that, I have too much to do in this life to sit around and just relax. But I changed it and I said the word nourish. And even saying that, like I train my mind, living meditation, that even saying that word does something to my nervous system. It does something to my mind and my body, right? It calms me, even saying that, and reminds me that if I want to live a very long, fulfilling life and achieve everything I wish, I have to nourish myself. I have to give it that time. That's that balance again, right? That I keep speaking of. So, what I do in my 40s is different than what I did in my 20s. And that's part of nature. And that's okay. I have a lot of other things on my plate now that I didn't have when I was 20,
Yeah, you think of it on a much more macro lens.
Yes, absolutely.
And
zoom out.
And often people maybe are too zoomed in to try and find balance in their life because they're doing it in the day-to-day rather than the year-to-year, decade-to-decade.
Absolutely. In fact, that is one of the main points. I'm pretty sure that's like within the first couple of pages of my book, Living Meditation, is that you don't have to, I choose to, and it's very beneficial to zoom out, right? That's a way of just saying broadening your perspective. Because by doing that, whether it's business, parenting, in relationships, your health, whatever it is, when you have a more clear and greater perspective, you can see more. Hence meditation. I mean, when we describe what meditation is, in many ways, at least the way I understand how it was taught in my lineage, is you do meditation to become more aware, to calm yourself, to purify yourself, ultimately so you can connect and see more clearly, right? So
you mentioned there just for a second that is my version of balance.
Yeah.
Talk to me a little bit more about what you mean by that.
Which part in particular?
Saying that my contemplation of balancing the macro for me, because balance used to be something that was conflicting in my head.
Yes.
And I viewed it as a negative.
Right.
But then you saying me contemplating that is my version of balance.
Yes, well, you're trying to balance it. Right? Literally, what you're doing is balancing your mind in that moment. So it's okay to say, I have a contradiction to balance, but ultimately, what you're doing is you're balancing your feelings on that. You're balancing what you're going to do about it. This is very like East. We need to be in the mountains of Korea right now. Like, yes, students. That's what I hear.
I see what you're saying.
Balance, but don't balance.
My contemplation on balance is my approach to balancing what I perceive to be an imbalance.
Right. Yes, this is the truth. But if you zoom out, it's how everything is. Every single thing that comes in front of us is balance. Every single thing equals living meditation. It's a constant process. That is what our ancient masters and teachers taught us. That I do find is a bit, I've never said this strong, but I'm not afraid to, a bit lacking right now in our modern world. We want everything right away. We want it right now. I want to take this thing and feel this way. I want to take this thing, do this thing, and have this result. And that's all fine, and that is applicable at times, but we have to remember we are part of life, right? And so it's never ending. I speak living meditation is I put it into 8 keys, which is how it was handed down. 8 keys of living meditation. So they're principles that you are constantly reminding yourself, reflecting upon, being aware of. And the first one is know your true self. So key 1 of living meditation is know your true self, which, by the way, as far as I'm concerned, and I understand, literally is never ends. I have yet to find someone who's like, I've got it. Because that's the nature of being human on this earth, no matter what our beliefs. That's the beautiful part of when you speak on that principle. I say the Tao or the universe, regardless of your religious beliefs, your political beliefs, your ethnicity, your age, we're all human. We all live on this earth. There's certain principles. That's how I was raised. And those principles, if we start to understand them, that is how we can cope. We can live, because life has beautiful moments. But let's face it, life can have a lot of challenges, But that is life.
The world would be different if people saw us all as human rather than labeled us as individual.
Yes, absolutely. And that's what I was saying. By nature, it's something that more and more I constantly even keep reminding myself that is personally where I've always felt the most comfortable. I imagine all of us probably do in some way, shape, or form. I don't
when you're
want to
living
speak
in
for
flow.
others. Yeah, that's exactly right. You're connected. And the second we keep dividing when to do, when not to do, yin and yang, there's times where you have to, of course, look at the differences and see everyone's individual skills and gifts or, the things that are not so great about them. But at the end of the day, I will have never understood, why do we jump there first? Why don't we all at least start from the place that we're all human? We were human thousands upon thousands of years ago. Hopefully we'll still have human beings on this earth thousands of years from now, and when you start there, I don't know, it's not so much tension, I find. It's not as much conflict,
Why do you think traditional medicine and Chinese medicine gets a bad rap in modern society?
No, I don't even think it gets a bad rap. You're talking to the wrong. I'm also me, right? So
True.
People are like, oh, I can't. And I get that. Please, I get it. It's just my nature. Maybe it's the warrior in me. It's my lineage. It's just what I came to this earth, who I am. But it never ruffled my feathers. The number of times people have probably fronted me, or I just don't even see it that way, because I come from, you're a human, I'm a human. If it doesn't resonate, I'm not here to convince you. I'm not here to convince anyone. No one can convince anyone of anything. The only person who can ever make any kind of decision is yourself. So if I can do anything in my personal life or not my personal life, but as a professional, personally in my life, to share certain tools that I know are incredibly effective, and I've seen them help people for thousands of years, they've not personally, but even in my own life, for my whole life, then awesome. But I'm not here to convince anyone of anything. So if you stand in front of me and you don't agree, awesome, move along. But also when you stand in front of me and have all the differences by nature and what I come from, my lineage, I'll see all the similarities. And it's a little bit hard sometimes to argue the principles of the way things are. We're both human. You want to argue that with me? You're a doctor, right? Okay, so your sole purpose as a doctor, your commitment is to take care of your patients, right? The answer better be yes. Even if it isn't, they're going to say yes in front of me, And so you just kind of keep moving down the path and remembering that we're on the same. And that's why it never really ruffled my feathers, no matter who I came across. So in my life, there were times that people may not have been aware of what this medicine is in this part of the world. And I really think about it, fine, sure. Maybe there was some pushback, but I just kept moving forward. And now look at where we are, So.
Well, what a freeing perspective too.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Because it does. A lot of people require someone else to reaffirm their position and validate in order to find significance in the world. But if you come to it from the place of I am, this is what I believe, and even if you don't believe, it's okay because our root is the same.
Yes. What are we going to argue about? There's enough arguments. I'm not here to argue with you. Eastern is better, Western is better. If you think Western is better, please be my guest. And if you find that you have a block in front of you, then I'm always here, to share whatever I possibly can.
It also then, this is interesting too, it also then places you as a lifelong student.
Always.
Because it's never an argument. And if there's a disagreement, it's let's figure out who thinks one way or the other. And maybe we can then learn from that because of the difference in opinion.
That's Confucian. The wisest human, he would say man at the time, woman, the wisest human never thinks that they know everything. They always are open. Doesn't mean you have to tell everyone this. I get that, but you're always open to understand, to absorb, to reflect upon it, and then move forward. That's wisdom. Knowledge we can learn in books, and it can take us far, but it can take us so far. Wisdom is actual life. It's experience, And so, yes, that's a very East Asian kind of way, something I didn't even share with you, I don't think yet, Kevin, but, and I do share this in the beginning of my book. It's the first time I ever really shared it in a public way that felt natural. But, my father studied from the age of 7 to 14 in the mountains of Korea, literally from a movie, with his Master Bodhian. I mean, this is my own father. So, and we were incredibly close. I mean, so close. And even with him here, he came all the way from Korea, lived his life, chose to come here to America because he felt, believed, whatever the word is, that this is where he was supposed to be to share exactly this. And then I chose to be an extension of that commitment, that duty, So it's different, right? Being in the mountains of East Asia, learning these principles as a student for all. He is one of the most wise, compassionate, truly, and a very awakened human being. Well, lived here in Southern California and did all the things, but I always, of course, think of him for all the reasons. But that's where I started coming up with that word natural. It's one of my favorite words, just be natural, naturally fit into things. It means a lot to me. I don't expect that to mean the same to everyone, but it was one of my favorite words because then these principles, the way of life, it becomes part of you. And do I have hard times at times? You better believe it. I'm not like just always zen and always know when to do and not to do. There's times to be tough and there's times to be soft and all the things. But
Asian culture, as we spoke, has had a big impact on my life as well. And as you speak about this, wisdom is definitely a through line that seems to be not only passed down, but as you read more and more and more into ancient lineage, this wisdom that was cultivated from so long ago is something that's still persistent today.
Yes.
I'm very curious, from having such a close connection to this as you do, what are some of the most important principles that you have either adopted or still subscribe to today that has allowed you to really live this balanced life that you do?
Okay, I love that question. Of course, I could answer, and then I'm going to go deeper here, the 3 M's. Of course, I have shared this whole time. My whole life is devoted to that aspect. But a step deeper when you ask that, and I think this is where what you're asking of me, are, things that are fulfilling in my life, things that ultimately nourish me and bring me happiness and joy, and all of that is, yes, purpose. I'm deeply rooted, which I don't know is Asian or not, but I do find that in general, that culture really pays attention to this, right? I don't want to just make statements. You've seen that as well. But it's that understanding of purpose, like, why am I here? I think I end the book this way or begin it. I can't remember this exact where I put this, but I say, one day, maybe no one will remember my face. One day, maybe no one will remember my name. But I wish to leave something behind on this earth when I leave that will make this place better. And so I'm very rooted in that. I'm very rooted in my faith that there's something greater than us, whether we speak of it as God, higher power, whatever that means, nature, whatever that means to you. I do highly recommend that you have something greater than you, right? That is the overarching kind of energy of everything. Family is incredibly important to me, my root, and that can even mean extended family. But those are some things that come to mind very quickly. Purpose, faith, family, the root, the people who are the most important to you, because we both have learned that, life can be short. And one thing I'm very grateful for is that by losing my father, at a somewhat early age, and very, very quickly, what I always remind myself of, and I'm grateful for this lesson, which is why I will never not remind myself, is how quickly life can be. You're here one day and maybe gone the next. And so you really do live to the best of your ability without regrets. And that can really, and I don't know if that's necessarily Eastern, that's me, kind of rooted in these principles, but that means if you're in an argument with someone or any kind of conflict or tension, or you're not nourishing yourself, whatever it might be, it gives you a different perspective to sit back for a moment and think to yourself, especially with I have 2 young boys. I mean, they're my everything. So I look at them, they also help me a lot, This is never going to go away. There's always going to be challenges and stress, and sometimes I have to cater to that, period. End of story. I prioritize it, and my boys know this too. I communicate it. But at the end of the day, is it really important to feel that much stress about this right now? I'm skilled. I'm intelligent. I can get through this, but maybe I can just calm myself, use the 3 M's, and then move accordingly. And so it's just not doing my very best to never have regrets,
Are there any specific habits or routines that you install daily to keep you moving towards this philosophy rather than getting sucked into the way Western philosophy believes that you should be?
Yes, absolutely. And again, I said this before, and I want to make a serious statement. I think that people oftentimes really overcomplicate things. And we all can do that. I can tend to do that too. So it really is a focus on not overcomplicating things. Stop making everything so complicated all the time. So the things that I practice are literally the 3 M's. When I wake up in the morning, I always do at least 15 minutes. And that's all you actually need. Listen, I'm a mom. I'm a wife. I'm a very good friend. I'm a member of my community. I own several businesses. I don't have a lot of time because I prioritize many different things. But to me, and what I was taught as well, is if you put your mind and your heart into something, for 15 minutes, you really do just put your mind into it. It can be better than hours of doing whatever practice, right? So always in the morning, I will wake up, I will do my moving meditation, my Qigong, which ultimately incorporates breath work, right? So every movement is part of, you connect your breath. So it's breath work / moving meditation. I will always wake up to do that. It grounds me, it calms me physically, literally, like my meridian systems, my circulation, my organs. It makes everything function. That's why those particular sets of movements have been passed down. The ones I practice have been passed on my lineage. With my breath, I always do my prayer in the morning quietly. I used to have much more of a ritual about it. I'm sharing all these things that I don't always. I used to have much more of a ritual because I enjoy rituals. I like rituals and traditions. But lately I find that it just feels correct to, even when I'm laying in bed before I wake up, I put my hand over my heart. I say my prayer. I pray to my angels, which is also something that I recently started because it felt correct to do. Then I get up. I do my movement, my moving meditation / breath work, my Qigong that I teach. And then I move on with my day. Wake my kids up, do the whole thing, make the lunches, and then eating properly. That's part of the M's. Food is incredibly important. I'm also half Korean. So eating, and anyone who knows me, they're like, oh my gosh, Jenelle. I mean, I eat. And actually that's one of my favorite principle, or let's say favorite tips, I think is a better word, on how to take care of ourselves. Eastern medicine states that one of the most important things for longevity, beauty, wellness, is that you eat consistently, right? And so at this point in my life, I do now what they call intermittent fasting. It's been around for a long time, probably before they called it intermittent fasting. So by nature, I usually don't eat until about noon. If I'm hungry before that, you better believe I'm going to eat because my body's telling me I'm hungry. You eat dinner early, but at set intervals. It's really important for your body. And to eat healthy foods, but that doesn't mean it can't taste good and all the things. Other cultures I have found, certainly Asian, European, even, in South America, you find that everything is very balanced, right? So they don't really, just by nature. So you eat the fats, you eat the spicy, you eat the salty, you eat some sweet, not as many sweets. So food is a good medicine, is the best medicine. Supplements, take the supplements that I make. I put on all the good skincare, hair care. So those are the ways that I incorporate. And then in the middle of the day, if I'm feeling fatigued, stressed, if something's, I go and I do my movement again. The 8 keys, in conclusion, of living meditation, as I speak of, are constantly. I mean, literally what I put out into the world, I could not live without. Like, I don't know how to make that more. People are like, wow, Jenelle, you're so passionate. I was like, yes, because you don't understand. I literally couldn't live without this.
I like too that you have the awareness and you've cultivated the awareness around what works for you and what works for your body, which is something that is often very easy to say, but very challenging to do.
Sure.
Where does that awareness stem from? Where have you cultivated that awareness from to say, I know that I'm feeling this way. Here's how I'm going to show up in this way moving forward?
Well, first of all, we kind of started, I have come to acknowledge, which I'm so grateful for, that it has been a part of my life since the moment I entered into this world. I mean, I know other people who this has been a part of their life that they don't necessarily do that. Again, it doesn't necessarily matter. I'm closer to it. But because of these philosophies and these tools, ever since I was young, they were a part of my life. So I've been aware of them. But now everyone can be, right? Hopefully I have something to do with that, just sharing these tools. And so it's my point being, you asked, how do I get the awareness? But that's how I'm going to answer as well. I have an awareness. I'm always checking in, always reflecting, sometimes I do a great job. Sometimes I have to recheck myself, but always checking in, how am I feeling about this right now? Like literally my health, how am I feeling? My emotions, how am I feeling? And I know that there's ways that you can balance that. So if I'm not feeling good physically, there are ways that you can make yourself feel better through the medicine, through eating properly, right? Through sleeping, through all of these types of habits. If you feel uptight one day, guess what? There's also ways you can balance that. To me, that's where movement is truly the strongest medicine. It's one of the quickest ways we can rebalance our mental health. And that's what people don't always know, which is why I feel very adamant in the last couple of years to teach that. Through breath work, through certain movements, it naturally calms your nervous system, calms your brain waves. In the Eastern medical perspective, it rebalances your meridians, right? Calms your mind, calms your Shen, as I said before. And then that's a way you can become more aware when you feel like don't know what's happening. And it's also a way that you can quickly ground yourself and then kind of sit back and move in a better direction, Pivot.
Talk to me a little bit more about Shen.
Shen, oh gosh, I did. I brought it up and here we go. Okay, so Shen is so difficult to, in the Western kind of lingo to describe this, but in Eastern medicine, you have your mind, mental, physical, and your Shen is literally like part of your spirit, right? But it's not spirit like we do prayer. It's not some esoteric. It's not religious. It's a part of literally our being. And you'll find even some herbs, like when you look at the Materia Medica, which is our huge encyclopedia of herbal medicine, and you just flip it open. There's ginseng. It gives you all the properties. That's what you have to memorize and know when you study. But you'll see some of the properties. That's actually where I got that word nourishing. A lot of times you'll see it nourishes the spirit. It nourishes your heart. So ginseng nourishes, or angelica nourishes nourishes your spleen. That's where that word comes from. But there'll be some properties or functions of that plant, of that herbal ingredient that literally will calm your Shen, that will root your Shen. And that's the spirit aspect that just naturally is part of your body. That when you sleep, it like raises above you, and it's in their medical books, So it's a little bit of a different paradigm shift, if you will, because it's different than what we think of when we think of spirit.
It's almost like your energetic field in a way.
Yeah, I think that's a great way of putting it. Sometimes that's where I find a little bit, that's where I have to go back. And like I said to you before, I think one of my number one roles is learning just how to communicate all of this in a way that, makes sense to people. Yeah.
I'm fascinated by the two sides of things.
Yes.
How?
The yin and the yang.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. How was all of this, I know this is a very high level question, but like how was all of this discovered so long ago and then passed down where a lot of what we're doing today still doesn't take into account all of the things that we know to be true from a traditional medicine approach?
Well, okay, so let me answer your first part of your question, which is actually one of my favorites. I find myself kind of giving even a 2 minutes of this, no matter where I teach around the world, because it reminds me, I become aware, and also I find it fascinating, and it makes sense. I think Eastern medicine a lot of times just makes sense, So one of my favorite things that when you understand how the medicine came about, literally 10,000 years ago, maybe more, but 10,000 years ago. Like I often start by saying that. Think about that, how long ago that was. I mean, are you kidding? They didn't have books. They did not go to school. In fact, they were known as Taoist immortals. So when I go and speak at biohacking conferences or we talk about biohacking, I often will say, well, the original biohackers were the Taoist immortals, right? So these were the practitioners, the people 10,000 years ago. Are the founder of, like the father of all herbs and plant medicine as we would acknowledge, was the Yellow Emperor, right? And I mean, that is how far back all of this goes. And so how I describe this is way back when they didn't have books and pens and they didn't go to school, and these immortals, they're called immortals because of what they looked for was to be immortal. Like here, we're just trying to be healthy and live long and not have pain and sleep well and be happy. Like they literally never wanted to die, hence immortal. So I find that very fascinating. And so the way it's understood through legend, but it makes a lot of sense because they didn't write things down yet, is that they looked at nature. That's where, again, it all comes from the Tao. They looked around and they saw how the trees grew, the grass grows, the mountains, what they looked like, how the rivers flowed, and they started to think to themselves, I wonder if what I see around me is exactly how my body works. One of my favorite things to understand. So they started incorporating, okay, just as I see the rivers flow, for example, to me, that's the way I actually love to educate on the meridians throughout our body. So at the end of the day, when people ask me, Dr. Kim, what is the key, ultimate key to health, to wellness, to beauty, it is function and flow, right? There's actually one more elimination, but function and flow. If we enable our bodies through all of the things that I've been speaking of to function properly, our organ systems, our circulatory system, our muscles, to function properly and have proper flow, that equals good health. And so that's how they started looking at it and how to this day, we still look at it, right? Even Western medicine, we're on the same page. There you go again. So think of it as we have circulation that runs throughout our whole body. We can picture that enough. Qi, vital energy, runs the same. That's the yin and the yang. So even in our own bodies, as I said, first came the universe, came yin and yang. That's night and day. Just as there's day and night, masculine, feminine, you cannot understand happiness unless you know sadness. You cannot understand success unless you know failure. That's the dichotomy that I started talking about before, no matter what. In our own bodies, it's circulation of blood and qi. So one way you can even look at it as yin in our bodies is substance, blood, body fluids. It's all the things, right? Yang in our body is qi, vital energy. And in some ways you can even think of it that blood moves because of yang, because of that qi. Okay, that's how Eastern medicine kind of understands it. So kind of in conclusion here, just as the Taoist immortals are very first practitioners to understand the human mind and body, including my ancestors and my lineage, they saw the way just as the rivers flow and dirt can build up, or a tree falls down, or there's trash in the water. Well, what happens to that flow of that river when all these things start to build? It creates stagnation. It creates a block, right? And then now the water can't flow. The same thing happens in our body. So as we age, by nature of aging, stress, trauma, you name it, it starts to create blockages in our body. So the way that we can kind of undo those blockages is by using the 3 M's, for example, medicine, whatever that looks like, to start to make everything function and flow better. So I've kind of answered a couple of your questions there. But that's where it all came from. They looked around at nature and then thought, that's how we work. And now here we are today.
Does that mean then the root of all disease and the root of everything comes from us removing ourselves from functioning and flowing in and eliminating in alignment with what we should be doing, quote unquote should?
I would say that. I want to think through and answer you correctly, but I would say that it all comes down to that. I mean, everything, literally, our relationships, in work, in our own human body, right? It's like you have to keep that flow. The second there's not flow, you have a conflict, you have an imbalance. That's also part of life. But every time we have an imbalance, some kind of block, actually we talked about that earlier as well, when you hit a wall, you have to realize that it's even there. You know how people are unaware of what is happening? Let's just look at our physical self. We wait until we seriously have something wrong before we know something is wrong. That is changing right now, and I'm very happy about that. We have to be aware of ourselves enough. And I get it too, as we shared. We're certain personalities. We go, do all the things. I'm right there with you. But it is really important to be aware when something's off.
Taking a quick break from this episode to remind you that your inputs matter. This show was designed and created to help you build a high-performing, healthy, wealthy life. So if you feel that you're getting value from this episode, please go ahead and share it with someone that you feel would get value as well. Now, fun fact, 90% of listeners of this show are not actually subscribed to the podcast. So if you would take a moment and go ahead and tap the subscribe button, it would mean the world to me. Thank you so much for being here. Now back to the show. You grew up with having awareness surrounding you, and that allowed you to cultivate this awareness as you continue to grow up. And you are, I would say, are very fortunate in a way to have been able to cultivate that. Talk to the inverse real quick. Someone who didn't have that benefit or didn't grow up with the heritage, lineage, the ability to examine oneself.
Right.
What would you or how would you advise them to begin to start a practice of self-awareness to cultivate that deeper understanding so they could move more towards this functioning, flowing
Absolutely.
way of life?
Absolutely. And I do recognize that. Again, I keep going back to the 3 M's. Clearly, I've trained myself on this as well. It shows, right? I really practice what I preach. It really does start with, yes, looking at how you're eating, how you're sleeping, realizing that these very core things of our life are actually very, very important. And what are you going to do about them? Doesn't mean you have to have all the answers. But the beautiful thing now is it is out there now, right? So, in general, eating a balanced meal. You know what I mean? It really does start with your food. Right? So not greasy, fatty foods, not, there's certain things that you can and can't do. So I won't go into so much detail, but look at the way you're eating, the things you're putting into your body, the things you're putting on your body. That's a great place to start, right? Become aware, just be in touch, even for the next, and something I also love to teach, remind myself, I live by this is, if there's certain habits that we find ourselves, and we're aware. If there's certain things, we tend to be angry, we tend to be really stressed, we tend to have anxiety, right? If you're aware of it, first of all, just become aware of it. We make things very complicated for ourselves. I really can't stand this. From now on, I'm not going to have any anger. Well, good luck. Are you kidding me? The whole reason why you have this is because probably your whole life is built up for exactly this. So one great place to start is remember one step at a time. So become aware of certain things that you do or that maybe you don't love about yourself. It's causing some imbalance. And in that next 10 minutes, be aware of it. If you find yourself in those next 10 minutes a little bit, let's say an hour. In the next hour, be aware of something, whether it's the food you choose to eat, whether it's the way that you're communicating with somebody, right? Or you're driving on the street, and if you tend to be really uptight and have road rage, maybe for that 1 hour, you check yourself. And then you stop and you step back and you pause and think, how do I feel now? It's a really amazing how powerful we actually are. And when we start to get into the right habits, right, then our whole life could change. And so I think I'm answering your question.
You are.
Okay, good.
You are 100%. I'm just always fascinated how, the why behind the who is something that I'm always interested in. But also someone who's gotten to a certain level of understanding and recognizing that within themselves, how to reverse engineer that for someone who maybe isn't as fortunate or hasn't gotten to that level yet. And my entire intention is to try and figure out actionable ways to simplify.
Same. I'm right there with you. And there certainly are. That's why I love calling them tools. What I share with the world in any and every way possible, if it resonates with someone, they're tools that we have that have been handed down because they work, because they're effective. Like I like getting to the point too. I'm very of the universe and love connection and plugging in. But let's be clear, I also like results and I want it to be effective.
What do you think Western society gets wrong that they could learn from Eastern philosophy?
The first thing that comes to mind without overthinking it, we overthink everything. Everything has to be, I'm all about thinking and intelligence, but we overthink everything. Stop. Again, it must be the theme of today after our, nourishing morning here. This is where I'm at. We just stop making everything so complicated all the time. It's not as complicated as we think. And if we keep doing that, life becomes incredibly challenging. And I don't want to end on kind of a daunting, but I look around and I see a lot of that right now. There's a lot of stress. And then that stress causes more stress, Meditation, we all have to meditate. Now we're stressed out because we're not meditating. I mean, it's like, if you step back for a second, it's crazy, I'm not eating properly. What am I not eating? It's in fact, I was just at a book launch with Dr. Joel Gator. I don't always bring up names, but I think he's wonderful. He's an amazing pediatrician, but just put out a book, and he said the same thing. Parenting in particular, it's so incredibly stressful because especially when you have children and you're as a parent, right? That's a great example because you're literally in charge of someone else's life who is completely incapable when they're first born. That's a lot of pressure, and everyone's telling you, I'll put it this way. 20 years ago, there was not enough information. Now there's so much information, and there's a lot of benefit to that, but also you have to, going back to kind of the Eastern, one thing I will say, the Eastern culture, and sometimes they'll even tell you, oh, no, we don't believe in that. We don't do that. And then you look into their life and it's just naturally there. In Eastern culture and in many of the ancient cultures, you have to have a root. So just be aware, right? So I'm kind of going on a different topic, but really important that I feel compelled to share. When you're learning something, whether it's medicine, where your products are coming from, the movement you're learning, the philosophy you're learning, where is it coming from? Who made this up? Because in a world where there is so much now, which I am all about, also know where it's coming from. Is this just someone's ideas? Where is the root? Because in Asia, you have to have a teacher. You have to connect to a lineage. You don't just go around, Anyways, I should probably be careful with what I'm saying, but but it's important, really important.
Distilling back to a first principle almost and finding the root cause, which is then a very Eastern philosophical approach too.
Yeah.
And I think that that's something that's overlooked a lot in the West.
Yeah, because it's new. That's all.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
To wrap up and in line with simplicity.
Okay.
What is the single most important input when it comes to understanding Chinese medicine?
When it comes to understanding Chinese medicine is, in general, you have to look at the whole. Where's the root? Always. Where's the root? That's the end point. Find someone who can give you that direction, start to understand yourself of what is the root cause of where a lot of mental, physical, even spiritual type of imbalances are coming from. And it's not super easy, but even the nature of doing so is a treatment. Does that make sense? So even going through the kind of, going down or going inward, okay, I feel this way, or this is bothering me. What is getting me here? That's important.
Dr. Kim, thank you.
Much so happy to be here.